excuse me, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. And today we're hearing from chapter 4, chapter 29, text 47. And this verse says, "My dear king, or Hisman, you should never out of ignorance take to the Vedic rituals or to fruitive activity, which may be pleasing to hear about, or which may appear to be the goal of self-interest. You should never take these to be the ultimate goal of life." And purports in Bhagavad Gita 2:42-43, it is said, "Yam imam pushpitam vacham pravodanti avipaschita Vedavada rata parta nanyat astiti karmatmana swargapara janma karma phala pradam kriya visesa bahulam Bhogaisvarya gatim prati. Men of small knowledge are very much attached to the flowery words of Vedas, which recommend various fruitive activities for elevation to heavenly planets, resultant good birth, power, and so forth. Being desirous of sense gratification and opulent life, they say there's nothing more than this. Generally, people are very much attracted to fruitive activities sanctioned in the Vedic rituals. One may be very much attracted to becoming elevated to heavenly planets by performing great sacrifices, like those of King Parhisman. Sri Narada Muni wanted to stop King Parhisman from engaging in such fruitive activities. Therefore, he is now directly telling him, don't be interested in such temporary benefits. In modern civilization, people are very much interested in exploiting the resources of material nature through the methods of science. Indeed, this is considered advancement. This is not actually advancement. However, but is simply pleasing to hear, although we are advancing according to such concocted methods, we are losing our real purpose. Bhaktivinoda Thakur therefore says, Jada vidya yata mayara vaya bhava tomara bhajane bada. Materialistic studies are the glare of Maya only, where they are an obstacle to spiritual progress. Okay, that's a very important statement. All the devotees, children who are going to school, they should be taught this very nice statement by Bhaktivinoda Thakur. Jada vidya yata mayara vai bhava tomara bhajane bada. Materialistic studies are the glare of Maya only, for they are an obstacle to spiritual progress. So, don't waste your time, therefore, with materialistic studies. You should rather dedicate your time to understanding Krishna consciousness. The temporary comforts of life experienced either on this planet or on other planets are all to be taken as illusory because they do not touch the real purpose of life. The real purpose of life is to go back home, back to Godhead. Ignorant of the real purpose of life, people take to either gross materialistic activities or ritual activities. King Vahisman is herein requested not to be attached to such activities. In the Vedas, it is stated that the performance of sacrifice is the actual purpose of life. A section of the Indian population known as Arya Samaj, Arya Samajist, lay too much stress on the sacrificial portion of the Vedas. This verse indicates, however, that such sacrifices are to be taken as illusory. Actually, the aim of human life should be God realization or Krishna consciousness. The Vedic performances are, of course, very glittering and pleasing to hear about, but they do not serve the real purpose of life. Okay, very good. A section, I'm going to read this again because it's very important. A section of the Indian population known as the Arya Samajists lay too much stress on the sacrificial portion of the Vedas. This verse indicates, however, that such sacrifices are to be taken as illusion. Actually, the aim of human life should be God realization or Krishna consciousness. The Vedic performances are, of course, very glittering and pleasing to hear about, but they do not serve the real purpose of life, which is obviously to go back to Godhead. It's not simply to recite nice Vedic nice Vedic sacrifices or engage in nice Vedic sacrifices. Sacrifices are to be taken as illusory. There it is. Actually, the aim of human life should be God realization or Krishna consciousness. The Vedic performances are, of course, very glittering and pleasing to hear about, but they do not serve the real purpose of life. There it is. Don't be duped by the elaborate Vedic performances. Rather, take the chanting Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. That's the greatest mantra. That's the most important mantra. And that's the mantra that will lead us to go back to Godhead. Text 48. Those who are less intelligent accept Vedic ritualistic ceremonies as all in all. They do not know that the purpose of the Vedas is to understand one's own home, where the Supreme Personality of Godhead lives. Not being interested in their real home, they are illusioned and search after other homes. Okay. Other homes like sense gratification and so forth. Purport. Generally, people are not aware of their interest in life, which is what? To return home back to Godhead. People do not know about their real home in the spiritual world. In the spiritual world, there are many Vaikuntha planets. And the topmost planet is Krishna Loka, Goloka Vrindavana. Despite the so-called advancement of civilization, there is no information of the Vaikuntha Lokas, the spiritual planets. At the present moment, so-called advanced civilized men are trying to go to other planets. It's a waste of time and money going to the moon. What are you going to do on the moon? Nobody can live on the moon. Or going to Mars or going to Jupiter. It's all nonsense. But they do not know that even if they go to the highest planetary system, Ramaloka, they have to come back again to this planet. This is confirmed in Bhagavad Gita 8:16. Brahma Bhuvanal Loka Punar Avartina Rijana Mam Upetya Takunteya Punar Janmana Vidyate. From the highest planet in the material world down to the lowest, all are places of misery. Wow. Wherein repeated birth and death take place. But one who attains to my abode, O son of Kunti, never takes birth again. If one goes to the highest planetary system within this universe, he still has to return after the effects of pious activities are finished. Space vehicles may go very high in the sky, but as soon as their fuel is finished, they have to return to this earthly planet. All these activities are performed in illusion. The real attempt should now be to return home back to God. The process is mentioned in Bhagavad Gita. Yantimav Yajino Pimam, those who engage in the devotional service of the Supreme Personality of Godhead return home back to Godhead. Human life is very valuable, and one should not waste it in vain exploration of other planets. Oh, yeah, what a waste of time and money. One should be intelligent enough to return to Godhead. One should be interested in information about the spiritual Vaikuntha planets, and in particular, the planet known as Goloka Vrindavana, and should learn the art of going there by the simple method of devotional service, beginning with hearing. Shravanam Kirtanam Vishnu. This is also confirmed in Srimad Bhagavatam 12:351. Kalera dosa nide rajan astihi eko mahan guna kirtanad eva krishnasya muktasanga param rajet. One can go to the supreme planet Param Rajet simply by chanting Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. This is especially meant for the people of this age. Kaler dosa nide. It is the special advantage of this age that simply by chanting the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra, one can become purified of all material contamination and return home back to Godhead. There is no doubt about this. Well, therefore, we shouldn't hesitate. We should take up Krishna consciousness right away and maintain it throughout our whole life. Why? Because simply by chanting the Hare Krishna mantra, one can go to any planet if they want, but should go to the supreme planet simply by chanting the Hare Krishna mantra. Text 49. My dear king, the entire world is covered with the sharp points of kusa, grass. And on the strength of this, you have become proud because you have killed various types of animals in sacrifices. Because of your foolishness, you do not know that devotional service is the only way one can please the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Very important statement. You cannot understand this fact. Your only activities should be those that can please the personality of Godhead. Our education should be such that we can become elevated to Krishna consciousness. Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. In this verse, the great sage Narada Muni directly insults the king because he was engaged in performing sacrifices that entail the killing of a great number of animals. We shouldn't kill even one animal. The king was thinking that he was great for having performed so many sacrifices. But the great sage Narada Muni directly chastises him, informing him that his animal killing only leads to his being puffed up with false prestige. Actually, anything that is done which does not lead to Krishna consciousness is a sinful activity, and any education that does not lead one to understand Krishna is false education. That's a nice statement, false education. Yeah, there's too many people nowadays engaged in false education. If Krishna consciousness is missing, one is simply engaged in false activities and false educational pursuits. This is what's taught in this false education is taught in the false uh, false
School system.
schools and false education. Actually, the every school you go to nowadays has no knowledge at all about Krishna consciousness. It's all about mundane knowledge, so that people can get a job, meaning becoming sudras, and avoiding completely how to go back to Godhead. All children today are being taught to become sudras and engaging in materialistic activities simply to make money and use that money for sense gratification. Nothing about Krishna is taught in the mundane schools today, unfortunately. Text 50, Sri Hari, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is the super soul and guide of all living entities who have accepted material bodies within this world. He is the supreme controller of all material activities. In material nature, he is also our best friend, and everyone should take shelter at his lotus feet. In doing so, one's life will be auspicious. Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. In Bhagavad Gita 18.61, it is said, Ishvara Sarvabhutanam Hridaya Arjuna Tishtati. The Supreme Lord is situated in everyone's heart, O Arjuna. The living entity is within the body, and the super soul, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is also there. He is called Antaryami and Chaita Guru. As Lord Krishna states in Bhagavad Gita 15:15, he is controlling everything. That's what they should teach children in school. They should understand that the Chaita Guru is in the heart of every living entity, and that the Lord is situated in everyone's heart and is actually controlling everything. We think we are controlling, but actually Krishna is controlling everything. So it continues. Sarvasya chaham hridisani visto matak smritil jnanam apohanam cha. I am seated in everyone's heart, and from me come remembrance, knowledge, and forgetfulness. Everything is being directed by the supersoul within the body. Therefore, the better part of valor, I like this statement, the better part of valor is to take his direction and be happy. To take his direction, Krishna's direction, one needs to be a devotee. And this is also confirmed in Bhagavad Gita 10:10. Tesam satata yuktanam vachitam pritipurvakam dadami buddhiyogam tam yenamam upayanti te. To those who are constantly devoted and worship me with love, I give the understanding by which they can come to me. Now, that is real knowledge, and that is the real purpose of life also. To those who are constantly devoted and worship me, meaning Krishna, with love, I give the understanding by which they can come to me. Although the super soul is in everyone's heart, Ishvara Sarvabhutanam Hriday Se Vijnatistati, he talks only to the pure devotees who constantly engage in his service. In Chaitanya Bhagavata, Antya 3.45, it is said, Tahari se Bali Vidya mantra adhyayayam. Krishna pada padme ye karaye stira mana. One who has fixed his mind on the lotus feet of Krishna is to be understood as having the best education and has having studied all the Vedas. There are also other appropriate quotes in Chaitanya Bhagavata. Okay, so the best education is what? Studying the Vedas. Rather than studying, mechanical things or other all kinds of junk. Like this one devotee, he became an expert in volcanoes. He got a PhD in volcanoes. And he couldn't get a job. Nobody wanted to hire him. He spent four years getting a PhD in volcanoes. Okay. Say Vidyara Phala Janiya Nishchaya Krishna Pada Padme Yadichita Riti Raya. The perfect result of education is the fixing of one's mind on the lotus feet of Krishna. Now, that's not taught to children anymore. That's not taught to anybody. It's not taught to adults either. The perfect result of education is fixing one's mind on the lotus feet of Krishna. Harivilas 13.178. Dig Vijaya Karibela Vidyara Karya Nahe. Ishware Vajile Sei Vidya Satya Kahe. Conquering the world by means of material education is not desirable. If one engages himself in devotional service, his education is perfect or perfected. I'm sorry. His education is perfected. Okay, of course, that is not being taught in schools today. Pade kene loka Krishna bhakti janibare se yadi nahiva tabe vidyaya ki kare. The purpose of education is to understand Krishna and his devotional service. If one does not do so, then education is false. Well, my dear devotees, everything taught in mundane schools is false, according to this. Tahare se Bali Dharma karma sadachara. Ishware se priti janme samata sabara. Being cultured, educated, very active, and religious means developing natural love for Krishna. Antya 3.44. Everyone has dormant love for Krishna. And by culture of education, that has to be awakened. And that's a profound statement. By culture and education, that has to be awakened, which is what? The dormant love for Krishna. That is the purpose of this Krishna consciousness movement. Once Lord Chaitanya asked Sri Ramananda Rai, what is the best part of education? And Ramananda Rai replied that the best part of education is advancement in Krishna consciousness. All right, this is not being taught in schools today. They're misleading children in schools today, teaching them how to become Sudras. A Sudra is a common worker. So a child that's trained in becoming learning all kinds of mundane things just to get a job to make money is basically been trained to be a Sudra, eating, sleeping, mating, and defending, and having money to spend on all kinds of nonsense things, and being completely in illusion about what is the real purpose of life. So once Lord Chaitanya asked Sri Ramananda Raya what the best part of education was, and Ramananda Raya replied that the best part of education is advancement in Krishna consciousness. Now, that is not taught in schools today. They think the best part of education is to become a Sudra and engage in working like a donkey and earning money and spending money for sense gratification. Text 51 says, Savai Priya Tamas Chakma Yeto Na Bayam Anvapi. Iti Veda Savai Vidvan Yo Vidvan Sa Gurur Hari. One who is engaged in devotional service has not the least fear in material existence. This is because the Supreme Personality of Godhead is the supersoul and friend of everyone. One who knows this secret is actually educated, and one thus educated can become the spiritual master of the world. One who is an actually bona fide spiritual master, representative of Krishna, is not different from Krishna. Okay, now this is a very important verse. And it's teaching us that devotional service is the real purpose of life. And if one who knows the secret is actually educated, and one thus educated can become the spiritual master of the world. One who is an actually bona fide spiritual master, representative of Krishna, is not different from Krishna. Okay, that's all very significant statements. And we should take a lot of, pay a lot of attention to this verse. 1 second. I have to fix my pencil. Oh, here it is. Okay. Sri Vishwanatha Chakravarti says, Chakshatra Daritvena Samasta Shastra Uktastata Bhavyata Eva Sadbi. The spiritual master is described in every scripture as the representative of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The spiritual master is accepted as identical with the Supreme Personality of Godhead because he is the most confidential servant of the Lord. Kintu prabor ya priya eva tasya. The purport is that both the super soul and the individual soul are very dear to everyone. Everyone loves himself. And when he becomes more advanced, he loves the super soul also. A person who is self realized does not recommend the worship of anyone but the super soul. He knows that to worship the Supreme Personality of Godhead is easier than to worship various demigods under the influence of lust and the desire for material enjoyment. Well, that's the biggest mistake people make in life. Instead of worshiping the Supreme Personality of Godhead, which is easier than to worship various demigods under the influence of lust and the desire for material enjoyment. The devotee is therefore always engaged in loving devotional service of the Lord. Such a person is a true guru. In Padma Purana, it is said, Satkarma nipuno vipro, mantra tantra visarada, avaishnavo gurursa nasyad, vaishnava swapacho guru. Even if a brahmana is very learned in Vedic scriptures and knows the 6 occupational duties of a brahmana, he cannot become a guru or spiritual master unless he is a devotee of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. However, if one is born in a family of doggies, but is a pure devotee of the Lord, he can become a spiritual master. What a statement. Even if one is born in a family of dog eaters, that's my family, but is a pure devotee of the Lord, he can become a spiritual master. The conclusion is that one cannot become a spiritual master unless he is a pure devotee of the Lord. One who is a spiritual master in accordance with the above descriptions of devotional service is, I'm sorry, one who is a spiritual master in accordance with the above descriptions of devotional service is to be understood as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, personally present. That's a big statement. According to the words mentioned here, Guru Hari, consulting a bona fide spiritual master means consulting the Supreme Personality of Godhead personally. One should therefore take shelter of such a bona fide spiritual master. Success in life means accepting a spiritual master who knows Krishna as the only supreme beloved personality. One should worship such a confidential devotee of the Lord. Okay, let's read that again. Success in life means accepting a spiritual master who knows Krishna as the only supreme beloved personality. One should worship such a confidential devotee of the Lord. Text 52. The great saint Narada continued, O great personality, I have replied properly about all that you have asked me. Now hear another narration that is accepted by saintly persons and is very confidential. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. Sri Narada Muni is personally acting as the spiritual master of King Bodhisman. It was Narada Muni's intention that through his instructions, the king would immediately give up all engagement in fruitive activity and take to devotional service. However, although the king understood everything, he was still not prepared to give up his engagements. As the following verses will show, the king was contemplating sending for his sons who were away from home, executing austerities and penances. After their return, he would entrust his kingdom to them and then leave home. This is the position of most people. They accept a bona fide spiritual master and listen to him. But when the spiritual master indicates that they should leave home and fully engage in devotional service, they hesitate. The duty of the spiritual master is to instruct the disciple as long as he does not come to the understanding that this materialistic way of life, fruitive activity, is not at all beneficial. Actually, one should take to devotional service from the beginning of life, as Prahlad Maharaj advised. Komara acharet pragno dharmam bhagavatam iha. Bhagavatam 7.6.1. According to all instructions of the Vedas, we can understand that unless one takes the Krishna consciousness and devotional service, he is simply wasting his time engaging in the fruitive activities of material existence. Narada Muni, therefore, decided to relate another allegory to the king so that he might be induced to give up family life within material existence. Well, an allegory is something that uh, helps one understand uh, knowledge, real knowledge. Uh, However, it may not be actually something that is uh, real, but it is something that helps people to understand things. Okay. The problem is today that everyone is so enamored by mundane knowledge, which is the only thing that's taught in schools today. They don't teach anything about Krishna consciousness in schools. They're just teaching kids mundane knowledge, how to become a Sudra and work the rest of their life in companies and earn money and engage in sense gratification. That is definitely not the purpose of life. However, young kids are taught to become Sudras and to work in different companies, make money, and spend money for sense gratification. That means that basically they're wasting their life, although they think that they're advancing in life. This is the real tragedy of modern education. And also, uh, what happens is that these young children they grow up and they are completely bewildered about what is the real purpose of life. They think that the real purpose of life is to have a job, make a lot of money, spend the money for sense gratification, and who cares about Krishna and Krishna consciousness? What's important is the money and sense gratification. That is the sad state of things today. Text number 53. My dear, please search out the deer who is engaged in eating grass in a very nice flower garden along with his wife. The deer is very much attached to his business. It's an allegorical way of teaching someone. The real person is the deer is the real person. The deer is very much attached to business, to his business, and he is enjoying the sweet singing of the bumblebees in his garden. Just trying to understand his position. He is unaware that before him is a tiger, which is accustomed to living at the cost of another's flesh. Behind the deer is a hunter who is threatening to pierce him with sharp arrows. Thus, the deer's death is imminent. Imminent. Well, that's a allegorical way of saying, telling people what is their very dangerous position, just engaging in sense gratification and making money and spending money, and their death is imminent. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. Here is an allegory in which the king is advised to find a deer that is always in a dangerous position. Yeah, deers are always in a dangerous position because when the hunting season comes, they are allowed to go and kill as many deers as they can, or sometimes they put a limit on the number of deaths that they can produce. But so the whole idea here is that a person is like the deer, always in a dangerous position. Although threatened from all sides, the deer simply eats grass in a nice flower garden, unaware of the danger all around him. All living entities, especially human beings, think themselves very happy in the midst of families, as if living in a flower garden and hearing the sweet humming of bumblebees. Everyone is centered around his wife, who is the beauty of family life. The bumblebees humming may be compared to the talk of children. The human being, just like the deer, enjoys his family without knowing that before him is the factor of time, which is represented by the tiger. The fruitive activities of a living entity simply create another dangerous position and oblige him to accept different types of bodies. For a deer to run after a mirage of water in the desert is not unusual. The deer is also very fond of sex. The conclusion is that one who lives like a deer will be killed in due course of time. Vedic literatures therefore advise that we should understand our constitutional position and take the devotional service before death comes. According to Bhagavatam 11:9-29, after many births, we have attained this human form. Therefore, before death comes, we should engage ourselves in the transcendental loving service of the Lord. That is the fulfillment of human life. Now, who is learning that? Well, in other words, which children are being taught that in school? Zero, nada. The children are just being trained to become sudras and work the rest of their life in companies and make money and spend money and pass stool and urine and basically ignore Krishna. And it says here, after many births, we have attained this human form. Therefore, before death comes, we should engage ourselves in the transcendental loving service of the Lord. This is the fulfillment of human life. And this is what should be taught to our children. This is what we should learn first and then teach to our children. We should engage ourselves in the transcendental loving service of the Lord. That is the fulfillment of human life, not simply making money and spending money and engaging in sense gratification. Okay, so text number 54. My dear king, woman who is very attractive in the beginning, but in the end, very disturbing, is exactly like the flower. Fantastic. What is attractive in the beginning and detestable at the end? Wow. With woman, the living at sea is entangled with lusty desires, and he enjoys sex just as one enjoys the aroma of a flower. He thus enjoys a life of sense gratification. From his tongue to his genitals. And in this way, the living entity considers himself very happy in family life. United with his wife, he always remains absorbed in such thoughts. He feels great pleasure in hearing the talks of his wife and children, which are like the sweet humming of bumblebees that collect honey from flower to flower. He forgets that before him is time, which is taking away his lifespan with the passing of day and night. He does not see the gradual diminishing of his life, nor does he care about the superintendent of death, Yamaraj, who is trying to kill him from behind. Whoa, what a situation that is. That's people are living without understanding that Yamaraj is right behind him, waiting to kill him. Just try to understand this. You are in a precarious position and are threatened from all sides. Wow. That's the real position of life in the material world. We are in a precarious position and are threatened from all sides. Haribol, this is scary. We should wake up, take the Krishna consciousness seriously, and not be gradually diminishing this life by eating, sleeping, mating, and defending. We should become cognizant of the superintendent of death, Yamaraj, who's trying to kill us from behind. And it says, just try to understand this. You are in a precarious position and are threatened from all sides. That's the real situation that we are in material life. And that's what's going to be explained in the purport by Srila Prabhupada. Materialistic life means forgetting one's constitutional position as the eternal servant of Krishna. And this forgetfulness is especially enhanced in the Grihastha ashrama. In the Grihastha ashrama, a young man accepts a young wife who is very beautiful in the beginning, but in due course of time, after giving birth to many children and becoming older and older, she demands many things from the husband to maintain the entire family. Prabhupada is amazing, just absolutely amazing. At such a time, the wife becomes detestable. Whoa, what a word. The wife becomes detestable to the very man who accepted her in her younger days. One becomes attached to the Grihastha ashram for two reasons only. The wife cooks palatable dishes for the satisfaction of her husband's tongue, and she gives him sexual pleasure at night. A person attached to the Grihastha ashrama is always thinking of these two things. Yeah, the nice dishes that the wife is going to make and sexual pleasure at night. Palatable foods and sex enjoyment. The talks of the wife, which are enjoyed as family recreation, and the talks of the children both attract the living entity. He thus forgets that he has to die someday and has to prepare for the next life if he wants to be put into a congenial body. The deer in the flower garden is an allegory used by the great sage Narada to point out to the king that the king himself is similarly entrapped by such surroundings. Actually, everyone is surrounded by such a family life, which misleads one. The living, yeah, you just think, oh, everything's going just fine. I'm very successful, I have nice children, a nice wife, a nice house, nice car. I'm passing good school. I don't have a problem. The living entity thus forgets that he has to return home, back to Godhead. He simply becomes entangled in family life. Prahlad Maharaja has therefore hinted, hitvatam, no, I'm sorry, hitvatma patam biham andakupam vanam gatoyad darim asrita. Family life is considered a blind well. Andakupam, well, that's dangerous. That means that you could fall down into the blind well very easily, not knowing that you're stepping into everything looks right, but you make the mistake of stepping on a blind well and you fall into the well. Family life is considered a blind well, under kupam, into which a person falls and dies without help. Prahlad Maharaj recommends that while one's senses are there and one is strong enough, he should abandon the Grihastha ashrama and take shelter of the lotus feet of the Lord, going to the forest of Vrindavana. According to Vedic civilization, one has to give up family life at a certain age, the age of 50. Take vanaprastha and eventually remain alone as a sannyasi. That is the prescribed method of Vedic civilization. Wow, this is such wonderful advice. That is the prescribed method of Vedic civilization, known as Varnashram Dharma. When one takes sannyasa after enjoying family life, he pleases the Supreme Lord Krishna. Whoa. Okay. Yeah, there was once a man who was a very nice person, and he made friends with a man who was married, and he would always periodically come and visit the married man and ask him, when are you going to give up your family life and take up sannyas with me? And the married man said, well, I'm not quite ready yet, but you can come back later on and talk to me. So every time the sannyasi would come, let's say after a year or 2 years, and talk to the married man, he would come and say, "Well, are you ready now?" And the married man says, "Well, I'm not quite ready yet. Come back again in a couple of years." So that kept going on and on. And then one time, when the sannyasi came to talk to the man, the the wife said, "Oh, he died." That's the truth. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Kick the bucket down the road. Yeah. One has to understand one's position in family or worldly life. That is called intelligence. One should not remain always trapped in family life to satisfy his tongue and genitals in association with a wife. In such a way, one simply spoils his life. According to Vedic civilization, it is imperative to give up the family at a certain stage by force if necessary. Well, Prabhupada claimed that he did not want to take sannyas. He was afraid of it, but he was one sense or another forced to do it. Then he realized it was actually Krishna's mercy. Mm-hmm. And look at all the good things that he did because he actually uh, did not succumb to the cushy family life. At a certain point, he gave it up completely and took up Krishna consciousness full time. Unfortunately, so called followers of Vedic life do not give up their family even at the end of life unless they are forced by death. Wow. There should be a thorough overhauling of the social system. Oh, this is good. And society should revert to the Vedic principles. That is, the four varnas and four ashramas. Yeah, there are uh, organized periods of life. Uh, so if you follow the organized periods of life, at a certain point you have to give up everything and take up sannyas. That's very important. And the wife should be taken care of with her adult sons, and the father should take complete renunciation under the let's say tutelage of bona fide devotees and become basically a mendicant monk who has no house anymore, is always traveling and preaching. That is the what you would call the ideal way to live. Yeah, you have 25 years of youth and education, and then you have 25 years of married life, and then the rest of the years you're engaged in devotional service. That's an ideal way of organizing your life. 25, 25, and then the rest of your life in Krishna consciousness. My dear king, just try to understand the allegorical position of the deer. So they're using the example of the deer to explain the real condition of the living being. Be fully conscious of yourself and give up the pleasure of hearing about promotion to heavenly planets by fruitive activity. Well, that's what's going on today. Today, they're spending millions, maybe billions of dollars trying to go to the moon. Nobody can live on the moon. Nobody that's born on the Earth planet will be able to live on the moon because it's a completely different atmosphere. And but yet they're spending so much money trying to go to the moon, instead of spending that money and their time on trying to go back to Vaikuntha. That should be the way they're spending their money and their uh, uh, early life of strength and knowledge. It should be spent trying to go back to Godhead, not going to the moon. What are you going to achieve by going to the moon? You'll just die. You can't live on the moon. It's a different atmosphere. I mean, people are going crazy, completely crazy.
Mars also.
Huh?
Mars also there.
The what?
Going to Mars.
Oh, Mars. Yeah. Nobody's going to go to Mars. They can't go to the moon. How are they going to go to Mars? How do you go? All right. Then it says, give up household life, which is full of sex, as well as stories about such things, and take shelter of the Supreme Personality of Godhead through the mercy of the liberated souls. In this way, please give up your attraction for material existence. Now, look, this is not what is being written down in the purport. This is
The verse.
the verse. This is what Krishna is saying. So this is not made up, or this is not our own, theory.
Narada Muni is speaking.
Yeah. In one of his songs, Srila Narottam Das Thakur writes, Karma Kanda Jnana Kanda Kevala Visharabanda Amrita Baliya Yebe Kaya Nana Yoni Sade Priya Kadarya Bhakshanakari Tara Janma Adha Pate Yaya. Fruitive activities and mental speculation are simply cups of poison. Whoever drinks them, thinking them to be nectar, must struggle very hard, life after life, in different types of bodies. Whoa. That has such a powerful influence if we read it and understand it. That's why people try to avoid coming to class and hearing these things. They prefer to keep sleeping than avoid the class.
We think the classes are the poison.
Such a person eats all kinds of nonsense and becomes condemned by his activities of so-called sense enjoyment. People are generally enamored of the fruitive results of worldly activity and mental speculation. Now, if you have, let's say, you have different preaching opportunities, and you read this to the people listening, they're going to be shocked. They're going to say, wow, what is this? I don't want this at all. I'm getting out of here. They generally desire to be promoted to heavenly planets, merge into the existence of Brahman, or keep themselves in the midst of family life, enchanted by pleasures of the tongue and genitals. The great sage Narada clearly instructs King Bharisman not to remain his entire life in the Grihastha ashram. Being in the Grihastha ashram means being under the control of one's wife. That's the truth. One has to give up all this and put himself into the ashrama of the Paramahansa. That is, put himself under the control of the spiritual master. Okay, that's the best place to be, under the control of the spiritual master. The Paramahansa ashrama is the ashrama of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, under whom the spiritual master has taken shelter. The symptom, so anyway, the Paramahansa ashram is the ashrama of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, under whom the spiritual master has taken shelter. The symptoms of the bona fide spiritual master are stated in Srimad Bhagavatam 11.3.21. Tasmat gurum papadyeta chinchna susreya uttamam sabde pade janisnatam brahmani upasrayasrayam. Very nice verse. This is Srimad Bhagavatam 11.3.21. Any person who is seriously desirous of achieving real happiness must seek a bona fide spiritual master and take shelter of him by initiation. The qualification of the spiritual master is that he must have realized the conclusion of the scriptures, and by deliberation and arguments, and thus be able to convince others of these conclusions. Such great personalities who have taken complete shelter of the Supreme Godhead, leaving aside all material considerations, are to be understood as bona fide spiritual masters. Okay, so there are bona fide spiritual masters, and there are nonsense people masquerading as spiritual masters. So basically, there are gurus. In other words, there are gurus and there are kangaroos. Basically, that's what this is saying. A Paramahansa is one who has taken shelter of the Parabrahman, the Supreme Personality of God. If one takes shelter of the Paramahansa, spiritual master, gradually through training and instruction, that's nice, gradually through training and instruction, he will become detached from worldly life and ultimately return home back to God. That's why it's so important to come to class every day, in the morning and the evening, and hear these transcendental purports by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. Prabhupada has taken the very, let's say, important service of instructing us with all this knowledge so that we don't make the mistake of eating, sleeping, mating, and defending, and then going to hell. He wants us to go back to Godhead, but you need to have knowledge. If you don't know anything about Godhead, you're not going to want to go there. You have to hear what it means to go back to Godhead. That's the most desirable place to go. It's not going to the beach and enjoying sense gratification at the beach. No, it's going back to Godhead. And that should be our real goal in life. There used to be this one devotee who would always sing, "We're going home back to Godhead." He would sing like that all the time. The particular mention of Anga's ashram, asatam yuta gatam, is very interesting. The whole world is in the clutches of Maya, being controlled by woman. Not only is one controlled by the woman who is one's wife, but one is also controlled by so many sex literatures. Oh, there's so many sex literatures, that's for sure. That is the cause of one's being entangled in the material world. One cannot give up this abominable association through one's own effort. But if one takes shelter of a bona fide spiritual master who is Paramahansa, he will gradually be elevated to the platform of spiritual life. Okay, so here it is. One must take shelter of a bona fide spiritual master. Yes. So, as we said before, there are gurus and there are kangaroos. So we should not take shelter of a kangaroo. We should take shelter of a bona fide guru who is actually following the rules and regulations of Krishna consciousness and has also a bona fide guru as his mentor. The pleasing words of the Vedas that inspire one to elevate oneself to the heavenly planets or merge into the existence of the Supreme are for the less intelligent, who are described in Bhagavad Gita as Maya Patrita Jnana, those whose knowledge is taken away by the illusory energy. Real knowledge means understanding the miserable condition of material life. One should take shelter of a bona fide liberated soul, the spiritual master, and gradually elevate himself to the spiritual platform and thus become detached from the material world. Even Prabhupada said when he was having dreams of his guru telling him to take sannyas, he said, "Oh, these were very, very, very stressful things that were appearing in my mind." Right? But he actually did take sannyas, although he didn't like it, but he did, and he did follow his guru's instructions. And look at all the good he did. See? According to Srila Vishwanatha Chakravarti Thakur, Hamsa Saranam refers to the cottage in which saintly persons live. Yeah, they don't live in a big house. They don't live in a in an opulence. They live in very simple uh, conditions, so that they have time for Krishna consciousness. If you have cars and you have 401ks and you have a lot of children and you have a wife and this and that, you don't have much time for Krishna consciousness. All that baggage keeps us engaged in mundane activities, life after life. Right? So we have to lessen the baggage. How do you do that? You come to class and you hear what we're hearing right now. That'll help you lessen the baggage that we have so that we can have time for Krishna consciousness. Generally, a saintly person in a remote place in the forest or in a humble cottage. And generally, a saintly person lives in a remote place in the forest or a humble cottage. However, we should note that the times have changed. I like the way Prabhupada writes. It may be beneficial for saintly persons, it may be beneficial for saintly persons' own interest to go to the forest and live in a cottage. But if one becomes a preacher, especially in Western countries, he has to invite many classes of men who are accustomed to living in comfortable apartments. Therefore, in this age, a saintly person has to make proper arrangements to receive people and attract them to the message of Krishna consciousness. Yeah, if you're living under a tree, and no, who's going to come to listen to you? Nobody. But if you have a nice arrangement, and people will come and sit down and listen to you. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, perhaps for the first time, introduced motor cars and palatial buildings for the residence of saintly persons. Very important statement. Yeah, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur used to have a very opulent car. And he would also, although he was extremely, extremely, uh, you know, engaged in tapasya, but still, he at one point he would drive around in a beautiful car. Of course, he had a driver, and he lived in some kind of opulence. But it was all to help other people take up Krishna consciousness, to show them that you don't have to live in a cardboard box to be a pure devotee. You can also have opulence, but the opulence should be used in Krishna consciousness, not for sense gratification. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, perhaps for the first time, introduced motor cars and palatial buildings for the residence of saintly persons, just to attract the general public in big cities. Yeah, if you look like a mendicant in the streets, no one's going to come to listen to you. They'll say, "Oh, this guy's a loser," you know. But actually, he's the most exalted person because he's given up sense gratification. But they would misinterpret the position of such a, let's say, sadhu who is completely free from sense gratification. The main fact is that one has to associate with a saintly person. In this age, people are not going to search out a saint in the forest. So saints and sages have to come to the big cities to make arrangements to receive the people in general who are accustomed to the modern amenities of material life. Gradually, such persons will learn that palatial buildings or comfortable apartments are not at all necessary. The real necessity is to become free from material bondage in whatever way possible, according to the orders of Srila Rupa Goswami. Anasaktasya vishayan yatarham upayunjata nirbandha Krishna sambandhe yukta vairagyam uchyate. A beautiful verse by Rupa Goswami. When one is not attached to anything, but at the same time accepts everything in relation to Krishna, one is rightly situated above possessiveness. So yeah, that means in Krishna consciousness, we can use everything in Krishna's service. So one time a devotee asked Prabhupada the question, "Oh, Prabhupada, you're saying that we can use everything in Krishna's service. How can we use an atomic bomb in Krishna's service?" I'm not kidding you. That question was asked. Prabhupada said, "Yes, we can use the atomic bomb to blow up the karmis." The Mayavadis, he said, the Mayavadis. One should not be attached to material opulence, but material opulence may be accepted in the Krishna consciousness movement to facilitate the propagation of the movement. In other words, material opulence may be accepted as yukta vairagya, that is for renunciation. Okay, now this seems to be an oxymoron. Right? In other words, material opulence may be accepted as yukta vairagya, that is for renunciation. Well, yeah, you want to have, let's say, a nice temple and nice prasadam and nice everything, so that when people come, they walk into the temple and they say, "Oh, this is very nice. I like this. These people are really very advanced in knowledge and living a good life. Yeah, living in the temple is actually living a good life. You don't have any worries. You're chanting and dancing and feasting every day. That is our culture, chanting, dancing, and feasting. So when people catch on to this, it takes a little time. They think, oh, they're living such an austere life. No, actually, we're living a very opulent life in the association of the deities who are completely opulent, right? They're not up there on the uh, podium looking gaunt and skinny and looks like they're suffering. No, the deities are opulently dressed, they're opulently served. So whatever we are missing in terms of opulence is uh, also what you would call given to us in the form of surrendering to the deities and uh, becoming, let's say, uh, uh, inspired every day by the opulence of the deities. We don't need to have artificial opulence in our own home or in our own life. And the opulence is the opulence of the deities that we can participate in by their beautiful dressing and nice prasadam and chanting and dancing with nice devotees. And that way, we don't feel as if we are destitute and lacking uh, any happy situation. Every day is a festival in Krishna consciousness. Therefore, you don't feel as if you're missing anything or that you are uh, forlorn due to being poor or ignored, etc. No, every day is a festival of Krishna consciousness, and every day one is full of happiness due to hearing Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam and dancing and chanting and also having nice prasadam and hearing Bhagavad Gita. Okay, and Srimad Bhagavatam. Text 56. The king replied, my dear Brahmana, whatever you have said, I have heard with great attention and, considering all of it, have come to the conclusion that the acharyas, teachers, who engaged me in fruitive activity did not know this confidential knowledge. Whoa. If they were aware of it, why did they not explain it to me? Very important verse. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. Actually, so-called teachers or leaders of material society do not really know the goal of life. Yeah, so if you think, well, I'll go to Elon Musk or I'll go to this so-called very opulent person who's famous, and I'll get educated by him. That would be a mistake. Why? Because that person will teach you to become what he is, a sense gratifier. He's not going to teach you to surrender to Krishna. So you want to really be educated, you have to go to a bona fide devotee. They are described in Bhagavad Gita. So it says, actually, the so-called teachers or leaders of material society do not really know the goal of life. They are described in Bhagavad Gita as Mayaya Partha, Jnana. They appear to be very learned scholars, but actually the influence of the illusory energy has taken them away from their knowledge. Real knowledge means searching out Krishna. Vedaischa Sarvir Aham Eva Vidya. All Vedic knowledge is meant for searching out Krishna, because Krishna is the origin of everything. Janma Dasyayata. In Bhagavad Gita 10.2, Krishna says, Aham Adir Hidevanam. I am the source of all demigods. Thus, Krishna is the origin and beginning of all demigods, including Lord Brahma, Lord Shiva, and all others. The Vedic ritualistic ceremonies are, let's go back to this statement. It says, thus Krishna is the origin and beginning of all demigods, including Lord Brahma, Lord Shiva, and all others. So, Lord Brahma is the father of all living entities, and Lord Shiva is the most exalted devotee of Krishna. So that's number one association, and Lord Brahma and Lord Shiva. So, therefore, it says the Vedic ritualistic ceremonies are concerned with satisfying different demigods. But unless one is very advanced, he cannot understand that the original personality is Sri Krishna. Govindam Adi Purusham Tamham Bhajami. After hearing the instructions of Narada, King Barhisman came to his senses. The real goal of life is to attain devotional service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Is this taught to our children in schools today? Answer, no. It's not taught to our children in schools today. Then the next question is, why would devotees put their children in such schools? Answer, ignorance. Child abuse. Yeah, you put your child in mundane school, it is child abuse. It's not child education. They don't end up being devotees. They end up being karmis after 18 years of education in mundane schools. We should take this seriously. Don't put your child in a mundane school with mundane teachers. It's better that your child be less intelligent than over intelligent in Maya. It doesn't serve any good results. They should not spend 8 hours a day in the association of unholy teachers and unholy children. That is a type of child abuse in Krishna consciousness. Of course, a lot of people will argue against that, but no. All right, then the question is, well, how should we educate our children? Well, you educate them by chanting Hare Krishna, hearing Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam. That'll take a whole lifetime right there. Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam. And also teaching them to chant and dance and have nice prasadam, and also go on Harinam Sankirtan and associate only with devotees. You cannot learn something by associating with karmis. Yeah, you learn to be a karmi, but not a devotee. You have to associate with devotees. Tell me who your friends are, I can tell you who you are. So if your friend is a person who eats alligators, there are people that do that. Did you know that? Yeah, alligator meat is actually eaten by a lot of people. So your child is not going to make any spiritual advancement associating with people that eat alligators. But your child will make advancement in the association of devotees. So why put them into mundane schools? You don't know who the teacher is. You don't know what the curriculum is. You don't know what the other children are like.
Mm.
Now you're putting your child in that very precarious association. And don't be surprised that after 8 or 12 or 20 years, your child is not really interested in Krishna consciousness. So when they're young, they come to the temple. But as they get older, they say, I'm not going to the temple. They say, I got too much homework. I got to do this. I got to do that. I don't have any time for the temple. It's a waste of time. I have to pursue my career. Yeah, your career. It's not a good career. Your career should be to be Krishna conscious and take up Krishna consciousness seriously. Okay, the king therefore decided to reject the so-called priestly orders that simply engage their followers in the ritualistic ceremonies without giving effective instructions about the goal of life. Well, that is what's going on today. You go to a spiritual program where you have these sadhus, and the sadhus are simply repeating uh, uh, what you would call the different mantras. Ha, hu, he, ha, wa, ha. Do you understand anything you're saying? I mean, practically. Do you understand what they're saying? No, you don't understand what they're saying. They could be saying ha, hu, he, ha, ha. So it's better to go and sit down in front of a genuine sadhu and listen to the lectures by the sadhu instead of the ha hu hi wa ha wa. You don't really understand all those mantras. I don't even think that they understand it. At the present moment, the churches, temples, mosques all over the world are not attracting people because foolish priests cannot elevate their followers to the platform of knowledge. Yeah. Not being, yeah, if you go to, a Hindu temple, it's all ha hu he ha hu ha hu ha. Nobody understands one word that they're saying, right? And all they understand is they pass the hundi, so you can. That's the only thing they understand. It's, oh, I got to put money out of my pocket. Not being aware of the real goal of life, they simply keep their congregations in ignorance. Wow, what a statement that is. Consequently, those who are well educated have become uninterested in the ritualistic ceremonies. Yeah. Ha he hu ha ha. They've given up the ritualistic ceremonies. At the same time, they are not benefited with the real knowledge. This Krishna consciousness movement is therefore very important for the enlightenment of all classes. Following in the footsteps of Maharaj Parishman, everyone should take advantage of this Krishna consciousness movement and abandon the stereotyped ritualistic ceremonies that go under the garb of many religions. The Goswamis, from the very beginning, differed from the priestly class that was engaged in ritualistic ceremonies. That's a nice statement. The Goswamis, from the very beginning, differed from the priestly class that was engaged in ritualistic ceremonies. Indeed, Sri Sanatan Goswami compiled his Hari Bhakti Vilasa for the guidance of the Vaishnavas. The Vaishnavas, not caring for the lifeless activities of the priestly classes, take the full Krishna consciousness and become perfect in this very life. That is described in the previous verse as Paramahansa Sharanam, taking shelter of the Paramahansa, the liberated soul, and becoming successful in this life. Okay, so what is real success? Making a lot of money, riding in a Rolls Royce, and eating all kinds of horrible things, and engaging in illicit sex, and having plenty of money, going on vacations all the time. That's not success, that is misery. Real success is coming to class every day and hearing Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam spoken by genuine devotees. That's success. That means you're actually learning something. The other things you're learning are all nonsense, bogus things that are not going to help you go back to Godhead. You think you're going to go back to Godhead by knowing algebra or different types of social studies? This one devotee I know, he got a PhD in volcanoes. He couldn't find a job. He spent 4 years or 8 years becoming an expert in volcanoes. He couldn't get a job. He ended up driving a taxi. I'm not kidding you. That actually happened. So there's a lot of junk knowledge today, so-called knowledge. And people are spending years and years learning junk knowledge that they're not going to use. Like, take it from your own example, from your own life. How much of what you learned in high school and college are you using today in your life? Huh? Hardly nothing. Hardly. You have to be educated. As soon as you graduate with your PhD, you still have to be educated by the company that you work for. You'll come in and think, I know everything. They'll say, forget everything you learned. We'll teach you what you have to do. That's the truth. So you see, you don't really need all that education. What you need is association, not education. Association of general devotees, genuine devotees. Okay, I think our time is up.
Our time is over time, but this is the most important class. We can go over time in this class.
All glories to Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Hare Krishna, happy. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. This is the real knowledge. Hare Krishna Mahamantra.